recording. If you do not want to be recorded, please, you know what to do by now. Um, and I'm going to share my screen. Share, there we go. Okay, share, blah, blah, blah. There we are. Okay, I'm going to move this over like a pro. I'm really proud of myself here. I had a few nightmares about whether I can manage all of this, but it seems okay so far. All right, so les amis, welcome, 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 welcome to the 2024-25 BC Language Coordination Association Book Club. Michelle and I are so excited and honored. We have an unprecedented 100 educators from around BC who signed up to be in this book club. That is just incredible. Thank you. You honor us with this interest. And as I said, we have people from all over the province, from the island to the Peace to the Kootenays and everywhere in between. Most of you are BC certified teachers. Some of you are faculty at university. Some of you are student teachers. So we're going to be on our best behavior for the student teachers, I hope. Everybody listen up so we make a good impression on those new and exciting teachers. So let me click in the right place. We're going to introduce ourselves first. We are your book club facilitators. Michelle, would you mind starting us off?
I certainly will. Thank you, Francie. And thank you again to everybody who is taking part in this book club. I'm so excited to see that the topic of language acquisition, which so many of us as language teachers have really never explored, have a chance to dig into Bill Van Patten, who is just an amazing second language acquisition specialist, researcher, and writer, and also very readable and very funny. If you happen to listen to his podcasts, I highly recommend them. But enough about that. I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Michelle Metcalf. As you know, I teach Spanish. I used to teach French, but our Spanish program is very big, so there's not enough room for me to teach French because Spanish is my first love. I teach 9 to 12 IB, and I am also the language coordinator at West Vancouver Secondary and sort of an ex officio coordinator of the district, working with some of the elementary teachers to help them with TPRS at the elementary level. And a TPRS and comprehensible input teacher pioneer in Canada, along with a couple of others that you may know, like Adriana Ramirez. And I think there are even some maybe in the group today. So we started this in around 2010 with workshops from Blaine Ray, which is where we began with teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, and branching off into other kinds of what are called comprehensible input based teaching strategies, the whole ball of wax. But that is what has been my core practice for the last 14 years. With amazing results, because I am held accountable for that IB exam at the end of the grade 12 year. And we get spectacular results without having to teach through a textbook or teach explicit grammar in any way. So there's a little shout out for not teaching grammar. I put my bias on the table right away.
Thank you.
Thanks, Francie.
And I'm Francie Carlin. I've been a passionate educator for 33 years, and I'm now, for the last 4 years, I've been the language coordinator in Kamloops Thompson. I am a member of the executive of the BC Language Coordination Association, and I have led a really privileged life that allowed me to acquire 4 languages: Swiss, German, German, French, and English. And if I had to learn any of those languages the traditional way, the way I was asked to teach them, I would not have learned one of them. And there's a little bit of my bias. Not a bias, it's my experience, my honest experience. So, moving right along, our meetings take place on Thursdays every month other than December. And of course, the last Thursday is in March 13th, and Dr. Bill Van Patten will join us and answer our questions and address whatever we may not have touched on. How does our book club work? I hope you all have your own copy of the book. And if you attend all 5 book club sessions, that could be live or through a recording. And no, I'm not going to take attendance and make little lines. It's on an honor system. And you are a BC educator, then you will get fully reimbursed for your book. Keep your receipt. More info will follow in March on how that is done. And we request that you please come prepared, meaning you have read the chapter, you have an idea where this is going, what's going on in the book. We are committed. Michelle. Oh, you're not. We can't hear you. Michelle, you need to unmute.
An excuse. Okay. So the purpose of this book club is to give you an experience via this book, this amazing book, Language Acquisition in a Nutshell, to Nancy.
Oh,
You have some bullet points there. A book club that is engaging and inclusive. Everybody is welcome. Everybody is invited. Safe and fun. There are no bad questions. There are no wrong answers. It's a place to explore the ideas that Bill Van Patten has presented in this particular book, and to enjoy our time together, have fun. And we also hope that it is a transformative experience. And we know that after reading chapter 1 or even 2, 3, or 4, you're not going to be running back to your classroom and immediately changing your practice. But at least this book will be enough to stimulate some ideas and give you some perspective on what you're doing, and have you maybe do a little inquiry, mini inquiry into your own teaching, and see if the way that you're teaching is aligned with what we know about language and language acquisition. So that's what we mean by transformative, that we hope that it will lead to some kind of, it'll provoke maybe some kind of change. Thank you,
you.
Francie.
Our structure. We have 60 minutes, and our intent is that we, in the beginning of book club, Michelle and I provide a summary and reflection on the chapter, followed by going into breakout rooms for 20 minutes, and you have a small group discussion with questions that we provide, and you discuss what has come up for you. We then bring it back to the whole group for a debrief conversation, your ahas and your yabats and all of that good stuff, with final words at the end. Are there any questions at this point about how book club works before we go ahead? And you can raise your hand or madly wave at me. I may not see everybody on my screen, so waving may not work so well. Okay, seeing none. We're also gonna, or Michelle, if you could keep an eye on the chat. Oh no, I can only see the chat. Anyway, if you have something to say, you may just have to speak up. We'll just make it that way. All right, let's dive right in. I want to provide you with a global overview of the book. Where is Bill Van Patten going? How is he building up this argument in this book? Chapter 1, he talks about language versus communication. We may at times conflate the two. We may not keep them fully distinguished. So he goes right for the jugular. What is language? And what is communication? In chapter 2, he talks about that language develops in an ordered way. Just like a tadpole goes from an egg to hatching and then growing his hind legs and then his front legs, so is language as acquired, in that it has an ordered way. The tadpole cannot grow its arms before its legs, and that applies to language as well. He says that order is not determined or affected by curriculum or effort. Just because we put something in the curriculum or the textbook in chapter 1 doesn't mean that's what they're going to learn in chapter 1, because language is acquired in an ordered way, just like a tadpole goes through its 7 locked in stages. Michelle, and you need to unmute.
Yeah, I am. And somebody has asked if we
Oh,
could mute everybody. I think you have that power, Francie. I'm not sure if you're getting feedback because of the room that you're in with other people,
Getting a little
that
bit
we're
of
getting some
feedback.
feedback.
Okay.
So if you could just
Oh, let me see here.
mass
Okay,
mute.
good. I will try. Can't promise anything. But Michelle, why don't you go for
Okay,
chapter
so
three?
well, very simply, it's how does like language acquisition happen? What contributes to language acquisition? How do these stages, how are they developed? What are the ingredients that are necessary for language acquisition to take place? And then, of course, what are the implications for teachers in a classroom? Those are some questions to explore. And Francie.
Thank you. You want to go for number four?
Sure. And he also makes a point, and I sort of suggested this in my little intro, that we have to look at the difference between implicit versus explicit learning. And one of the things that will come up over and over again from chapter one and beyond is that language acquisition is an implicit process. That is an unconscious process. It's like breathing or your heart beating. You're not in control of it to the extent that we may think we are as language teachers in a classroom. Many of us, I think, have been trained or have experienced explicit language learning where we learn vocabulary lists, we learn how to conjugate verbs, we learn what we think are patterns that Bill Van Patten actually suggests do not exist in reality, in a psychological reality. And so when we look at language acquisition, we have to see that it is, in fact, an implicit process, and that has implications for how we're going to teach it. I'm
Merci
done.
beaucoup. Thank you. If I had to summarize Bill Van Patten's thesis in one statement, it would be this. Language is too abstract and complex to teach and learn explicitly. As such, he says, any approach to language teaching in the classroom must be different from approaches to teaching other subjects. So in the prologue, Bill Van Patten says that in this book, nothing is shared that could be in any shape or form construed as being controversial. Also, he says that the book is not about how or what to teach. Instead, the goal of language acquisition in a nutshell is for teachers to be able to make informed decisions and have realistic expectations of themselves and their students. He says also in the prologue that teachers are informed about many aspects of teaching, but rarely about the nature of communication, language, and acquisition. And these are these three big clunks that he really distinguishes in this book. And I'm definitely one of those teachers in my teacher training. I never once heard anything about language acquisition theory, any of Krashen, none of that. So I'm definitely one of them who is just like, what? There is some theory about this? How exciting. So, moving on to chapter one, where he really dives in. What is language and what is communication? How do they overlap? How are they distinct? So he asks, what is language? He says, and bear with me, this is a lengthy quote. In linguistics, language is an abstract, complex, implicit, mental representation of the formal properties of words, sounds, constraints on sentence structure, meaning, and how these relate to each other. So language is a mental representation, and he then dives in and really looks at what does it mean that language is abstract, complex, and implicit. So he starts off with abstract. He states language is an abstract mental representation, and he starts us off with a verb. We are all taught, and if we were asked, what is a verb? We would all say, oh yeah, it gives us the tense and it's the action and it agrees with the subject and all these things. But Van Patten is able to make an argument in the book over and over again that I won't even try to recreate here. But he basically gets us to the point where we have to agree. We all know what a verb is, yet we have difficulty pinpointing its nature. We simply know one when we see one. Constructs, he continues, such as verbs, nouns, and subjects, are abstract concepts that defy description in everyday terms. And it's these everyday terms that we're using in the classroom all the time. And yet we do these terms a disservice, and it may even create confusion. So language is abstract. He says language is too abstract and complex to be put into neat little rules on the page of a level one textbook. What's on textbook pages is not what winds up in anyone's head. As such, rules aren't psychologically real. Michelle, you can elaborate on that.
Well, I think it's actually quite clear in the context of the previous quotes here is that when we try to teach students a language through conjugation of verbs or learning different tenses or memorizing connecting words or memorizing lists of vocabulary, um, that is not how the language is acquired, and it's very piecemeal in the way that it's acquired. And what we think are rules, they actually don't exist because the language is being acquired in its interaction, as um, Francie previously had displayed, that interaction between the sounds of the language, between the context of the communicative situation, between the words, between the morphemes, between so many different things are interacting and interplaying with each other that we can't uh, tear that apart and say that these are the rules that govern language in the way that it is acquired, because that is simply not the way it happens. It's far too abstract for us to explain the any number of rules that we could even try to imagine as an explanation for language acquisition.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. So how then do we learn a language? In chapter one, he says every learner of a language must build an abstract representation of the language being learned over time. And that representation can't be found in textbooks. And here, Bill Van Patten gives us a glimpse into the future, where he's going with the book, where he's going to make a strong argument later on. Language is an abstract representation and we build it over time. Every student has to build this map in their mind of how this language works. And it's not done explicitly, it is something that happens implicitly, but we're going to get there soon. So he goes on, language is an explicit mental representation as complex. It says complex here, Francie. Language is a complex mental representation. It has the complexity maybe akin to an airport where everything from the bathrooms needing to be clean to airplanes not falling out of the sky, everything has this complexity. And he uses the example of the fly in the soup. He says, for every single sentence, there is a complex interplay between the words and the syntax and the morphology, phonology, and so on. I can say there's a fly in my soup. I can say there's a fly in my soup. There's a fly in my soup. We always have a literal meaning and we have an intent. There's this complexity going on between all these different pieces. And so he goes on, he says, language is an implicit mental representation. Here it is. Implicit in this context means unconscious. And he makes us the example of this. The book was so compelling, she reread it the same day. Versus, she petted the dog, and when it wagged its tail, she repetted it. We all know that the first sentence works. We can say reread, but repet, we all know is like, that sounds weird. I don't think you can do that in the English language. You have to find a workaround. That's an example. This is an example of our implicit knowledge of language, that some things work, some things don't work. We often demonstrate implicit knowledge by demonstrating both what we know is possible in a language and what is impossible even though we can't say why. We may not be able to put our fingers on it. We don't have the, PhD in linguistics to explain it, and yet we just know this works and that doesn't. So we're moving towards the end of the chapter. He has now, he's now introducing the term of communication. Language, he says, can form a part of communication, but it is not equivalent to communication. Aha, so they are distinct things. They're not synonymous. He defines, Michelle, would you read the communication
Yes.
definition?
And I would like to gesture this because I have learned that gesturing is a very powerful way to remember concepts, to remember vocabulary. I use gesturing a lot in my class, and I've learned that gesturing this definition is very powerful. So you might want to join me. Communication is the expression, and the interpretation of meaning in a given context for a purpose. So that again is different. We can use language in order to communicate. When we acquire language, we will then ultimately use that language in order to communicate, but they are not the same thing. So, Francie.
Thank you. I see Anne has her hand raised. Anne, if you want to unmute yourself, and we need to keep it super short
Yeah.
because
There
we're
was
already
something
over.
I could have done this in the breakout room, but I just remember reading repeated, and it made sense to me. Like if when we taught elementary school, kids are inventing language even in their own language. So repeated is something you might hear with the younger ones and with my foreign students. Absolutely. That's all I was going to say in
Thank
terms.
you. Thank you, Anne. Absolutely. Yep. So, in a nutshell, this is the book in a nutshell. Language is a mental representation. I think of it like a three-dimensional map in the brain that we don't even know we have. Language is a mental representation. It exists in our heads. It is abstract, complex. It is implicit, unconscious, and it is not tied to culture. Communication, on the other hand, is a behavior that happens between people and other entities. It is dependent on context and purpose and is tied to culture. So, back to the ultimate summary statement, language is too abstract and complex to teach and learn explicitly. As such, any approach to language teaching in the classroom must be different from approaches to teaching other subjects. We're now going to go into a group discussion. When you get into your groups, it will be groups of 4 to 5 people. In those groups, you will appoint a leader who facilitates the conversation. You will have a timer. The timer's job is to keep an eye on the time. Okay, so we have whatever we're going to have, about 15 minutes or so, and making sure that everyone in the group gets about this equal amount of airtime, gets to express their thoughts. Everyone is invited. Yeah. And one person will be the reporter who reports back to the groups any highlights or ha-has. It doesn't have to be a comprehensive summary, but just one or two thoughts that stood out for you personally as a reporter, or that you thought this is where our group really had a deep conversations. You have 20 minutes, but we don't have quite that much time, so we're going to cut it to 15. Michelle, do you think that's okay? Okay, we're going to give you 15 minutes. And I'm going to give you the questions now, and I invite you to take a picture with your camera of those questions once they're all loaded. So we're four questions. In your group, discuss language is too abstract and complex to teach and learn explicitly. What are the implications of BVP statement? Do you see yourself as a language teacher or as a teacher of communication using another language? What is the difference between the two? Language teacher versus teacher of communication. 3, to what extent do you think it is important that learners develop an implicit, unconscious system of language as opposed to an explicit system? And lastly, in your book on page 27 are beautiful questions called Considering the Classroom. There are 4 beautiful questions. Choose any of those. You're not likely going to get into depth with all of those questions, so pick and choose which question intrigues you, what will help you in your work. And this would be a great time to take a picture of those questions so you have them in front of you. And in the meantime, we have, now is my time to bring out my math.
Sorry, Francie, could you go back 2 slides just for a moment?
Yep, this one here.
Oui, merci.
D'accord. We are 53 people. Okay, I'm gonna put you all into your groups, breakout rooms. We have, oops, voila. And see you back in about 15 minutes. Talk 20 minutes. Um, am I in a chat room with iPhone 158, Barbara and Landon? Yeah, look at that. I didn't think I was going to be in a room. I'm sorry for that. I don't want to stand in your ways, but
Francie, I just joined the call about 1 minute ago, so I'm
okay,
not. That
okay,
might be why we're together. I'm not
aha,
sure what's going on because I just arrived.
okay, no problem. Barbara and Landon, do you hear me? Okay. All right. So there's nobody responding there. If at any point you are coming online, that would be great. So what is your ni name, iPhone?
Hi, Megan.
Megan, and where are you calling from?
I am in the Upper Sunshine Coast in Cosset.
Upper Sunshine Coast. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. So I'm Francie. I have you over here, but my camera is over there, so I'm doing this whiplash
Okay.
thingy. Are you able to, it looks like you're driving.
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just planning to listen in, so um, yeah. But
Okay, so let me see what I can do. Okay, so iPhone. This is my first time doing breakout rooms. You know, I've been in bazillion breakout rooms, but I haven't facilitated them. Just, huh. Okay, let me go back. Okay, no, okay, assign to. Okay, I'm gonna assign you to another breakout room. Just, I'm gonna put you. I'm going to put you into breakout room 6. I think you might be happy there. There we go.
thank you.
Yeah, of course. Landon, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, Nicole. Hi,
Sorry, I'm
Nicole.
here now. Hi,
Hi. Are you just joining us?
I am just joining you.
That is perfect. So they are in breakout rooms.
Oh, okay. I was like, where is everyone?
I'm happy to add you to a breakout room. And of course, yeah, you'll be just fine. Let me
All
see,
right.
breakout room. I'm going to put you into, there's one with only 3 people. So I'm going to put you in there, breakout room 4. And we're going to be back in like 6 minutes or so. So it'll be short and sweet. Sign to 6. There we go.
I think I hear you now. Joy.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
What is going on here? Lisa, did you just join us?
Yes, sorry.
No, no sorries needed. You join us whenever you can, and I'm glad you're here. Dina Schultz, also, it looks like you just joined us.
Yes, I just finished some parent-teacher interviews.
Yeah, all
Sorry.
good. No, don't never say sorry. We're delighted you're here and you come when you can. I know the deal. So they are just in breakout rooms. They're for another 3 minutes or so. I'm going to call them back in about two. And then we'll discuss. So we've had a bit of an introduction. Sorry, you're here. My camera is there. So I'm going to talk not anyway. Um, they had a bit of an introduction. So the most important thing about book club is that you are going to get reimbursed for your book if you're a BC certified teacher and you attend all sessions, either live or recording or a hybrid of the two. We're not going to take attendance. We're not taking little lines. It's an honor system. And in March, after our last session, you can send in your receipt and you will get reimbursed for the book. So that's the number one thing. And then Michelle and I provided sort of a summary of the prologue of the book and the chapter one. And we then gave teachers and they're mostly teachers. There are some university faculty, some student teachers. There are over 100 people who've signed up, which we've never heard of. But that's super exciting, obviously. Um, um, so they're now discussing some questions that we gave them, some prompts from these first two chapters. So that's what's been going on. So I'm now gonna call them back. And I need to figure out, okay, close all rooms. So they now have, no, I have another 50 seconds before I call them back. We're
No, I got
precisely.
confused. I was sending emails to everyone I knew that might know about this session. It's because when the survey comes, you have to use Gmail,
Okay.
and therefore my link went on Gmail and not on my
Oh,
work.
yes.
And I was trying to find, I was like, I'm sure I saw an email with it, and I couldn't figure out where it was. And I finally found it. It was showing on my phone, but then it's not my personal email. It's like I have a Gmail for school. So it went, anyways, it went on that one. And I don't look at those emails often, especially since we can't do Google Classroom anymore. So,
What happened to your Google Classroom?
oh, the school district wanted us to all move on with they wanted us to be on Teams, Microsoft Teams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
I won't discuss more
No,
that.
of course not. This is not
It
about,
is not user friendly. So
oh,
so
no.
yes, it's creating a lot of other
Okay.
difficulties. So that
Okay.
was the reason I was just trying to figure out where the information was to join you guys.
Of course. Lisa, feel free to send me an email and I will, with the email that you want me to use.
Okay.
Maybe that's what
Okay, I'll do
happened.
the same thing
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we have the same situation in
Okay.
School District 23. We're not using Google anymore.
Okay. Wow, that's
Well,
interesting.
we're still using it, but not
Okay.
officially.
Oh my God. Our lives are so interesting. There we
Mhm.
go. Everybody started to come back. That is awesome. Wonderful. I'm going to mute everyone. There we go. I figured out how to do that. Mute all. Come on. No, I was I was being mute all. Scroll to mute participant entry. Okay. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Continue. There we go. All right. And I'm going to unmute, or if Michelle Metcalf, where are you? Not back yet. No, they're going to milk the last second, of course. Michelle, if you are back, where is
I'm
she?
here.
Oh,
I'm
you
here.
are. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Michelle is going to take us through a report, and then we'll go into open discussion.
So we are down to the last 20 minutes. Just looking at my watch here, it's 4:10, 4:11 now. So what we had thought is that we would give 10 minutes to just any reporter who would like to speak on behalf of their group and try to just capture the conversation, maybe some of the highlights, one highlight, two highlights. Since there are so many groups, we have a chance to share as much as possible. And then once everybody's had a chance to share, then we can open up to more of a discussion and, ping pong, piggyback on other people's ideas or elaborate or any kinds of questions. So looking for a volunteer, a reporter who took that role and volunteered to report back to the group. Is there anybody? I can't see all the participants, Francie, so maybe you can
I have
identify
three
who had the
screens of
hand up.
faces.
Okay,
Yeah. But you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak. Okay, I see
just don't.
Sandra Buckland and
Oh, yay.
Sandrine Goebel.
Yay, fantastic.
There they go.
Green on. Go, Sandrine.
Okay, 1 minute.
Okay, okay, go. Okay, so for question number one, we thought that was accurate. That, the best way to learn a language is like to move to the other country, learn the language implicitly, and then, but also that French immersion is kind of imitating that, like it's about the whole journey of French immersion and the implicit learning of the language. And so there's a lot of that. Number two, that we feel that we're both a teacher of communication and language. And what was this? Oh, yeah, in core French, we're really trying to have them understand what they're reading as well. And communication allows for language acquisition. So we're thinking about the AIM program and that you're using more gestures and how in using the gestures, that's going to help the language acquisition and make you more comfortable in the language. And then number three, I can't remember the question specifically, but basically that implicit seems to work better. We're getting better results. So with like TPRS and things like that, we're getting better results.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was great. Any other volunteer to report out on group's discussion?
Carl, I see Carl's hand up.
Thanks.
Hello. Could you just repeat question one? So I will answer the question one.
Of course.
It was the quote, I think.
Yeah, language is too abstract and complex to teach and learn explicitly.
So that's the only question we got to actually, because we had a nice discussion. But quickly, we agreed to it. And we did mention that, well, as the learning of a second language is really similar to learning of a first language, and we don't learn the first language explicitly, but we learn it implicitly, so that we should try to do the same thing in our classroom and spend the little time that we had on developing this implicit competence rather than spend too much time on explicit rules that will not transfer into spontaneous interaction. In a nutshell, that's what I said.
Yeah.
Oh, in a nutshell, just like the book.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carl.
Perfect.
Thank you, Francie.
Carl, can I continue with that thought?
Mm-hmm.
Our group also talked about how implicit learning is obviously better and you learn it better. Like when you're trying to teach a rule, you see that the kids make that mistake all the time if you're just trying to teach it explicitly. However, we talked about the reality of the classroom and how that's not always possible to just get them to understand, especially in a French immersion classroom where they're hearing mostly speakers that are L2, they're speaking their second language. And then some errors get fossilized, like j'ai allé, j'ai allé. We hear that all the time because they're hearing their friends say it. And so they feel like, okay, that sounds good, that sounds right, but obviously we know as speakers that it's not correct. So we got to that question, and then we got to number 2, which we also said we were teachers of communication, but also communication in a second language, and that's kind of different than just communication in general. And I added to that at the end of the chapter, the author was talking about culture and how he didn't think that maybe you had to teach about culture. But I want to contradict that and say that he was also talking that communication is for a purpose. And what is that purpose for the kids? To introduce kind of a context to why we're learning French, especially, or why are you learning Spanish? I think that's kind of the basis for second language learning. Why are you choosing to learn it? And that cultural piece might be actually pretty important for them. Not part of language itself, but a background for teaching it.
Thank you, Tracy. That was great. Thanks. Any other report outs?
I can say a word or two from
Okay.
our
Yes,
group.
please, Trish.
We had a lot of the lovely TRU students in our group who are elementary non-French specialists.
Okay.
And so that number 2 question is actually quite a big one there, because they didn't necessarily realize in signing up to be an elementary school teacher that they would also possibly be a French teacher. And so where does that fit into their creation of identity in this new career of theirs? Can they do the job without identifying as that role? Or is it necessary to pick and say, I am or I am not a language teacher, when you have to teach core French to your intermediate students? So we came away with actually more questions. The same with number 3 with the developing the system, is we recognize that actually learning an additional language actually happens fairly quickly, as opposed to the first language that we learned. The first language we learned, it took 3 to 4 years to get communicative with it, really. And we can do that with our learners actually very quickly. But what we need to do is reread, and we need to read ahead in the book to be looking at how the additional languages kind of piggyback on the learnings of the primary language. So we want more information and we want to dig deeper. We're ready to go.
It's so good.
And that is very good timing, because we're down to the last few minutes. So maybe we can open up to discussion related to any of the comments, something maybe that Trish just commented on, or I'm very interested in the comment that Tracy made related to culture, or anything else that we're just going to open it up to discussion and keep it orderly. So feel free to unmute yourself and put your hand up, because we're down to the last 10 minutes.
Hi, I can just share a little bit of what we spoke about, because we had a unique situation where we have 2 teacher candidates in our group, and then 2 teachers that have had 25 plus years of teaching. And so 2 different perspectives. And mine started off as an elementary teacher to now being a high school teacher with languages. And Carmen is a teacher, the reverse. So it's unique perspective that we kind of discuss, just how we were taught with teaching. It is core French. I don't have the French immersion background, but my teacher candidate does. And so it's different ways of seeing how we interpret that with our communication in the class. And it's we are aiming to be more implicit through stories and through communication, through conversations that we have.
but sometimes we have the pop-up grammar and just as Tracy mentioned, the correction on the things we hear, we want to kind of jump in and correct sometimes still too. So yeah, good discussion.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Brenda.
Yeah, thanks.
We mentioned the pop-up grammar too in our group discussion. The pop-up grammar came again as a way of, just feeding in a little tiny bit of that more explicit thing, but just you mention it. It's a, 5-second, 20-second explanation, and then you move on just to draw attention. You sort of move into that explicit zone out of your more implicit subconscious kind of teaching. So yeah, we brought that up as well. Any other comments related to culture, identity as a teacher? I think that was a really interesting question.
I see Lisa raised her hand.
Lisa, yes. And we have, nope, just Lisa.
Lisa Dreher, yeah.
So I wasn't there during the discussion. I kind of just arrived late, but just listening to the culture aspect, I would say, as a French immersion teacher for the higher grades, for secondary school, I find culture is really important because at that point, you're trying to give them different perspectives, different cultural perspectives, and they're learning about more the expressions and the way we speak and the way we do things. And there are some
subtleties.
Thank you. That really is cultural, and I think that's what makes it great. It's because learning about another culture indirectly, you're learning about accepting different people and opening your world. And I think you can't really just, if you don't add that as a teacher, then I think you're missing out on the whole thing. Is we're supposed to live together. And I always say to kids, I say, it's for English and French people in Canada to better understand each other. That was kind of one of the big component of French immersion, is not just the language aspect, is to understand the other side. So it kind of, for me, it totally is integrated.
And just to follow up on that comment, it's very integrated into our curriculum as well. So it's not, traditionally it was very much of an add-on, and teachers would say, well, I don't have time to teach culture. And I think there is a new perspective about the significance of culture and trying to embed our language in some sort of cultural context. And I think that Bill Van Patten is actually saying that it is possible that language acquisition isn't dependent on culture, that language acquisition as a mental process and building that mental representation is not culture in and of itself. And I think he's trying to help us to understand that the process of acquiring the language and constructing that mental representation in the brain is not related to culture. It's like breathing. It's an implicit process that is a human process and is not in itself is devoid of culture, just as a process. So I think he's trying to help us to keep those ideas separate so that we can have a clearer understanding of the acquisition process. In the classroom, I think we have to look at our identity, that I think Trish was talking about. That's a really good question for those teachers who are not trained in French or who don't have a Francophone background or haven't studied the language. And then also Tracy's comment and yours too, Lisa, about the importance of bringing that culture, because what is the purpose of our teaching the language or having our students acquire the language? It has to be for a bigger purpose in our education system. Yeah, Lisa, did you have your hand up? Or Natalie has a hand up. I see Carl again.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
Beverly.
in what order. Francie, maybe.
Let's go with Beverly, Natalie, and Carl.
Okay.
I think their hands up were before mine, but that's okay. I don't have that much to add. I just wanted to say, yes, Michelle, that I agree with what you were, because the question that Tracy posed is one that I was thinking about while reading as well. But I do think the point is just to try and separate those two for us. I'm not sure that it's as helpful as it was perhaps intended to try and separate those two, because if we're talking about how we learn languages implicitly. Culture is a part of that implicit understanding of a language. Like we cannot, I don't believe, truly separate those two things, because even what Van Patten is talking about in terms of implicit understanding is half the time culture. Like it's in the ways that we communicate in certain contexts, etc. So I understand the separation and the intent of trying to separate them, but I think that there's an inherent kind of flaw in that argument. I think it's just probably unfortunate that it was kind of thrown in at the end of the chapter.
I agree. And this is something we can bring
it's
to
kind
him
of what
in
you walk
March.
away with. Yeah, exactly. But I fully understand, like what
And
he's trying to do in
yeah.
terms of separating that
You may
language.
have noticed that we have omitted that part in our summary. I didn't want
But it was the elephant in the room.
I'm glad you all brought it up. Natalie.
Yes. So for me, on all the takeaways, it's going to be, I'm really determined to ask my students who are LFI grade 7, like to draw what's in their mind when I start with passé composé. When I mention these words, what's coming? And I'm kind of getting excited about like, what are they going to come up with? Like, are they going to come with some English word, a sentence that they memorize to help them? When I don't know. It's going to be what I'm going to make them do tomorrow or Monday. I'm not sure. But yeah, want to see what's in their brain.
Thank you, Natalie. Carl, you have the last word almost.
So in summary, no, just kidding. I just want to say that like what Beverly said, 100%, what she said, and plus in the chapter, they do the clear distinction between language and communication. And I think that for communication, culture is absolutely necessary because without it, we don't know when to use what, to whom, to speak how, etc., etc. So, and that's just what I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Yes,
So that brings us to the end of book club session 1. We shall meet. So we have this resource here, and in the lower corner you have this QR code. I also put that into your emails. This website is there for you. All the Zoom links are always there, and there's session recordings will go up tomorrow. And there's a resource page as well with some videos of Stephen Krashen. As Michelle mentioned, Bill Van Patten has 2 podcasts. One's called L2 with BVP, and the other one is T with BVP. Did I get that right, Michelle?
It's T. Talkin' L2. Talkin' L2 is the first one, and T with BVP is the second one.
Yep. Very entertaining, very funny, always ask guests. Links to these podcasts are on this resource page here for you to access. Of course, everything is free. There's some other resources suggested. So by all means, take advantage of that. We shall meet again Thursday, November 28th. That's after the Delphi exams for those of you who do those. Chapter 2. And that is on the dot. I can't believe it. I'm Swiss. Okay, this is meaningful to me. We invented time. Auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, goodbye. Thank you all so much. I really, really enjoyed spending this time with you, and we look forward to seeing you again in November.
Thank you, everybody. See you soon.
And thank you, Michelle, of course.
Merci, merci.
Merci. Gracias.
Muy bien.
Muy bien.